Gidi Bharadhari Gopi Janam Jagiri Bharadhari Jai Jashodanandana Jai Brajachana Ranjana Jai Brajachana Ranjana Jashodananda Jai Brajachana Ranjana Jai Jamuna Tira Banachari Jai Kunjabi Hari Jai Jai Jamuna Tira Banachari Jai Kunjabi Hari Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vashadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Chaitanya Sri Advaita Gadadha Sri Vashadi Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare Rama Rama Joyam Vishnupad Paramhangsha Puribrajagacharya Ashtatara Saraswasamansula Abhay Charanarabinda Bhakti Vedanta Shami Shri Prabhupada ki ISKCON Pratishad Acharya Shri Prabhupada ki Ananta Kuri Vaishnava Vrinda ki Shamaveta Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Grantad Srimad Bhagavatam ki Navadip Mayapur Dham ki Jai Shri Nitai Gaur Shitanad Brahmanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Krishnai Svadamu Bhagate Dharma Jnana Divishaha Kalo Nashtadrisham Esha Purunaka Adanoditaha. Grantat Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. Bande Aham Shri Guru Shijuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagarajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitang Tang Shajivam Shadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Shaitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shibishakam Vidangscha Mantra Guru Tashika Guru Ganta Chodane Yage Kori Abandon Bancha Kalpatrubhyashta Kripa Sindhu Bebacha Patitam Pavaneva Vaishnava Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaudavani Pachandini Vishesha Shandavari Pashtatta Desha Tarine. Seven. Kastam anādṛtya para-anucintām rite paśūn asatīṁ nāma kuryāt paśyan janam patitam vaitaraṇyāṁ sva-karmajān paritāpāñ juṣāṇam. Kastam anādṛtya para-anucintām rite paśūn asatīṁ nāma kuryāt paśyan janam patitam vaitaraṇyāṁ sva-karmajān paritāpāñ juṣāṇam. Please chant. Matrimandali. Kaha, who else? Tam, that, too, but. Anādṛtya, by neglecting. Para-anucintām, transcendental thoughts. Rite, without. Paśūn, the materialists, asatīṁ, in the non-permanent nāma, name, kuryāt, will adopt, paśyañ, definitely, seeing definitely, janam, the general mass of people, patitam, fallen, vaitaraṇyāṁ, in Vaitaraṇī, river of suffering, sva-karmajān, produced from one's own work, patitam, paritāpān, suffering, juṣāṇam, being overtaken by. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Who else but the gross materialists will neglect such transcendental thought and take to the non-permanent names only, seeing the mass of people fallen in the river of suffering as the consequence of accruing. Seeing the mass of people, this is one sentence. Who else but the gross materialists will neglect such transcendental thought and take to the non-permanent names only, seeing the mass of people fallen in the river of suffering as the consequence of accruing the results of their own work? Question mark. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In the Vedas it is said that persons who are attached to demigods to the exclusion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are like animals who follow the herdsmen, even though they are taken to the slaughterhouse. The materialists, like animals, also do not know how they are being misdirected by neglecting the transcendental thought of the Supreme Person. No one can remain vacant of thought. It is said that an idle brain is a devil's workshop. However, because a person who cannot think in the right way must think of something which may bring about disaster. The materialists are always worshipping some minor demigods, although this is condemned in Bhagavad Gita 7:20. As long as a person is illusioned by material gains, he petitions the respective demigods to draw some particular benefit, which is, after all, illusory and non-permanent. The enlightened transcendentalist is not captivated by such illusory things. Therefore, he is always absorbed in a transcendental thought of the Supreme in different stages of realization, namely Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagwan. In the previous verse, it is suggested that one should think of the Supersoul, which is one step higher than the impersonal thought of Brahman, as it was suggested in the case of contemplating the Virat Rupa of the personality of Godhead. Intelligent persons who can see properly may look into the general conditions of the living entities who are wandering in the cycle of the 8,400,000 species of life, as well as in different classes of human beings. It is said that there is an everlasting belt of water called the river Vaitaraṇī at the entrance of the plutonic planet of Yamaraj, who punishes sinners in different manners. After being subjected to such sufferings, a sinner is awarded a particular species of life according to his deeds in the past. Such living entities as are punished by Yamaraj are seen in different varieties of conditioned life. Some of them are in heaven, some of them are in hell, some of them are Brahmins, and some of them are misers. But no one is happy in the material world. All of them are either class A, B, or C prisoners, suffering because of their own deeds. The Lord is impartial to all circumstances of the sufferings of the living entities. But to one who takes shelter of his lotus feet, the Lord gives proper protection, and he takes such a living entity back home, back to Godhead. Srila Prabhupada Ki. Mukham karoti bācālam pangum langāyate girim chatkripa tamaham bande Sri Gurun dinadarinam. The Lord is impartial to all circumstances of the sufferings of the living entities. Samoham, shamoham. I am equipoise. Samoham, sam aham, sama aham, sama. I am equal. Samoham sarva bhuteshu, to all living beings. Na me dvesha, na asti na priyaha. Na me dvesha, I do not hate anyone. Na asti na me priyaha, and no one is, and nor do I particularly favor anyone. What's Krishna talking about here? He's talking about the role of the super soul in the heart. And as Prabhupada explains here, that the Supreme Lord supervises, and the material energy inflicts the sufferings upon the conditioned soul according to Bunjana evatma kritam vipakam, evatma kritam, which the actions you've performed. Bunjana evatma kritam vipakam, the mature fruits, the mature results of the actions that we have performed, bunjana, have to be endured. And the Lord, He doesn't interfere with that infliction of the results of the previous karmas of the living entity. Although He doesn't interfere with that, He just lets it happen, although He is entirely responsible for it happening. And Prabhupada gives an analogy in 4th chapter, Bhagavad Gita, text 15, that just like the rain, nothing grows without the rain, but the variety of vegetation, just like you can see a nicely cultivated garden, and in the same rain you see a jungle, just a jungle, this and that growing there. So everything is dependent upon the rain, but there's some independence. Nachamam tani karmani nibadnanti dhananjaya. Even though he is actually responsible, because nothing happens without the control of the Lord. Nachamam tani karmani nibadnanti dhananjaya. However, he's explaining, even though I'm doing all this, nachamam tani karmani nibadnanti, I am not affected by it. I'm not affected by it in any way. It doesn't affect me. There's no reactions for the Lord, even though nothing is happening without it. Udashina vadashinam. Udashina, vad ashinam. But ashinam, I am seated, udasin, means neutral. It lets it happen. Ashaktam teshu karmashu, completely detached from all this work. So why is it happening? The materialists, they blame God. I remember here many years ago, 23 years ago, 22, 23 years ago, we were having Bhagavatam class over there, in the Sankirtan room there, it was smaller. So many people, Mayapur developing so much. Before Panchatattva established, Hari Shori Prabhu was giving class. It was on the day of the first day of the millennium, 2000, right? 2000, the first day of the 2000, year 2000. There had just been a big tsunami. And people in Thailand, in South India, Chennai, people were killed, affected, tsunami, big tsunami from an earthquake. So the newspapers were saying, where was God? Where was God? You talk about God, but how did He let that happen? But every day they're being crushed, they're being smashed, they're being suffering. Every day. Just because it happens all in one time at one place, everybody gets philosophical. This is when they become a little bit, this is like the human life. The mouse make me a cat, make me a dog, make me a tiger. Human life. Now we can dismiss God. We can dismiss God. We've become so intellectual, become so advanced. We can dismiss God by logic and argument. How can there be a God if there's suffering in the world? But Bhagavad Gita explains suffering is required. Suffering is required to rectify. Without suffering, we would just stay here. Even if you become a devotee, without suffering, I'll hang around. Suffering has to be there for purification. The suffering has to be there. Mama maya duratyaya. Mama maya devyeshu gunamayi, mama maya duratyaya. Why it's so durati, very difficult to defeat. Because you can't. You come to the point that it's not possible to defeat Maya. Ma me veya prapadante. Therefore, let me surrender. We use the word surrender. I give up. Surrender, white flag. I give up. I've had it. It's impossible. You can never get ahead of Maya. You can never avoid the misery completely. Dukkha yonaya evati hi shangspashya bhoga. And the really frustrating thing is that the more you try to enjoy shangspashya bhoga, the more you enjoy that, dukkha yonaya, that's the cause of your suffering. Dukkha yoni, the womb of the suffering, is samspashya bhoga, the pleasure you get from the senses. It's meant to be like that. Eventually you get Bhagavad Gita. Another example Prabhupada gives is the prison house. The Udashina, the judge, he puts you into the prison house. And the king, the Prabhupada says, in the walls of the king, and in the walls of the prison, the walls of the prison, the disobedient citizens within the walls of the jail. However, sometimes the king comes and he releases out of his mercy. The king comes, so it's not just all bad. He comes. He comes, and not only does he come now. We were just in Ramkelly a few days ago. You have to visit Ramkelly, such an ecstatic place. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was performing Sankirtan, and then this nearby the Nawab's palace, you can go and see that palace. You can see where Mahaprabhu was performing Kirtan. Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur installed the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu there. And there's the deities, Madan Mohan, the deities of Sanatana Goswami are worshipped in that place. You can go to that place. And ISKCON, recently we acquired land just 100 meters from that place. 14 bigger. And there we have planned His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj, ISKCON GBC for Bengal. He's inspiring devotees to establish the Rup Sanatan Vidyalaya. Rup Sanatan Vidyalaya. Aj hoite toma naam Rup Sanatan. The place where Mahaprabhu initiated Rupa and gave them the name. Aj hoite toma naam Rup Sanatan dhanna chara tama dhanna fete mon. Give up your humility. It's breaking my heart. Today, from now, you'll be known as Rup Sanatan. That place, just a few meters away, we will have the Rupa Sanatan Vidyalaya, and His Holiness suggested that there we have the study of the Goswami Grantha, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, not just the first 19 chapters. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu College, and the College of the Goswamis. So it's an open field. Anyone wants to go there and preach, you can take a train from Navadip. 5 o'clock afternoon, you get into Melda in the evening. Or another train leaves at 9:30 in the morning, gets into Melda at 3 p.m. Train, comfortable journey. And come back on the Jan Satabdi Intercity Express. Leaves there at 6 a.m., gets here at 10:30 in the morning. Easy, you should go there, preach there. There's nothing there. It's completely undeveloped. There's just clay huts and ISKCON's land. After the 500 years ago, where Gauranga Sri Hari, his Kamal Charan, his lotus feet, walked through that place. Nothing has happened. It's just the cows, just the mud cottages. When ISKCON comes there, it'll be such a place. So get involved in the beginning, and then it'll become more part of your heart. So the jail, we were talking about the jail. The king goes to the jail sometimes. How did I get on to Rup Sanatan? Forgot. Oh yeah, I can't remember. Anyway, the suffering is meant to be there. The suffering is meant to be there. Krishna Boli, yeah, Mahaprabhu Shikha. The suffering is meant to be there. But the suffering, yeah, that's what I was saying. Mahaprabhu at that place, he was doing the Sankirtan. That's right, yeah. I've got the thread again. At that place, he was doing the Sankirtan. His chanting of the holy name could be heard for 2 or 3 miles away. So even if you're in Melda city, it's still a special place. Because that place, Mahaprabhu's personal, his chanting of the holy name was reverberating throughout that whole area. And he's at that place. We hear this quote, but we don't know where it was spoken. We don't know where it's so close. And Pritibiti Ache Jota Nagaradi Gram Shabbat Procha Hoibe Monam. Mahaprabhu raising his 2 hands. There was some concern about the Nawab And they were trying to give the message, enough Sankirtan here, go on to the next destination. They were trying to give the message, but Mahaprabhu couldn't even attract his attention. And then all of a sudden, he felt there was some anxiety amongst the devotees. He raised his hands in the middle of the kirtan, raised his hands, Pritibidi Achai, Jota Nagaradi Gram, on this planet, Jota Nagaradi Gram, as many towns and villages there are, Sabatra, in all of them, Pracha Hoibe Mon Nam, my name will be preached. So it's not that he just comes to the prison occasionally, but Gauranga Sri Hari's mercy, Potit Pabon Hetu, he's coming to your door. Even I often reflect, I had no plan to become devotee. I had so many other plans. I had no plan. I had so many other plans. What to speak of becoming a missionary in foreign country? No plans. But you get reclaimed, because Prabhupada went to Melbourne. Gyana Samudra Prabhu is here from Melbourne, and Prabhupada's disciple. Prabhupada went to Melbourne. So out of his causeless mercy, he went to Melbourne, Mahaprabhu, and he established Melbourne Mahaprabhu Mandir. And on that Bhyasasan, he sat and he said, the people of Melbourne have become fortunate because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has appeared here. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has appeared here. And that's why I am here. Only because Prabhupada went to my city and established Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And by some causeless mercy, I happened to stagger into that temple one night and fall down in front of the lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that's it. After that, everything finished. So you're not even looking. Manushyanam Shahasreshu Kashchit Jatati Sita. Hardly anyone... 1 out of 1,000 is looking, but we're not even looking. I wasn't interested. But association with Mahaprabhu and his devotees, it changes your heart. So he comes to the prison occasionally, gives association and delivers. So then the suffering is meant to bring us to the point of understanding you can't make it. And then when you become a devotee, you don't need to suffer anymore, or at least not as much. Not as much. Jiv Krishna das e bishash kole to adukhanai Radha Krishna bol re shabhai. Jiv Krishna das e bishash. When you understand you're servant of Krishna, adukhanai. Jiv Krishna das e bishash to adukhanai. You don't need to suffer anymore, because the suffering is meant to rectify you, that you can't make it in this world, so give up. So then when you, I'll use my senses to try to satisfy the senses of the Rishikesh, Shevanam, satisfy the sense of Rishikesh. I'll do that instead of satisfying my own senses. Then that's it. You've learned. You don't need such miseries anymore. Constantly being beaten by the personality of Godhead. You at least you've understood. Although there's still, because of habitual conditioning, still there may be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But you'll still get there. And eventually 1 step back will be less and less and less. And abhyasha yogajuktena chetasana annagamana. You stick to it. Chetasana abhyasha yogajuktena. You practice abhyasha yogajuktena. Chetasana annagama paraman purusham chintam jati para-anucintām. Anucintām. Without any anxiety, without any doubt, you're guaranteed if you stick to it. Abhyasha yogajuktena chetasana annagama. You don't go away. You stick to it. Paramam Purusham Dibbam Jati Parta Anucintām. You'll get there. You'll get there. So, Jiv Krishna Dase Bishash Kole to Adukhanai. You don't need to suffer anymore because of association, carrying on and the practice of Krishna consciousness. Eventually we'll be completely purified. So Prabhupada said here that those who are attached to demigods, to the exclusion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are like the animals who followed the herdsman, even though they were taken to the slaughterhouse. The materialists always worshipping some minor demigods, although this is condemned in Bhagavad Gita 7:20. Who knows the verse? Prabhupada didn't give it. He just says 7:20. Who knows the verse? Yes, tamas tata rita jnana prapadyante anādṛtya. Those whose intelligence is stolen by rita jnana, intelligence is stolen, prapadyante anādṛtya. They surrender to the demigods. Tam niyamam ashtaya prakrita niyata svaha. And the second part of that verse, Prabhupada often quotes the kamashtashta rita jnana, the intelligence is stolen by material desires. The second half of that verse is very interesting. Why is it that they're condemned? Oftentimes people, they think, well, it's, at least there's some worship is doing something. Yes, but very slow progress. They'll take so slow compared to worshipping Sri Hari. But why is it condemned? Because it's not the same. People have this idea that it's very modern. It's new age. There's as long as you have faith in something. As long as you have faith in something, you know, that will save you. That will be good for you. But that's not true. It's according to Bhagavad Gita. It's not true. 17th chapter, another one of those sections of Bhagavad Gita which is not discussed enough. The divisions of faith. It's not that it's all the same. Trividha bhavati shraddha. Trividha bhavati shraddha. There are three kinds of faith. And obviously you'll know what they are. Three kinds of faith. Dehina sva-karmajān, which are produced from the sva-karmajān, the modes of material nature that are influencing you. Your faith is sva-karmajān. Dehina sva-karmajān. So you develop, they concoct a faith based upon the way the modes of material nature influence you. When I was young, I was in the Society of the Catholics. And on Friday, you'd meet all the Catholics in the fish market. You'd meet all the Catholics in the fish market on Friday. Because the Catholics on Friday, they don't eat meat. Maybe you didn't know that. Yeah, but they don't eat meat on Friday. And then there's Lent. Lent is a whole month, I think before or after Easter, can't remember. But they don't eat fish, they don't eat meat on Friday. It's like a rule that they follow. Tam tam niyamam ashtaya, prakrita niyata svaha. Tam tam, they take shelter of rules which are prakriti niyata svaha, produced from the influence of the modes of material nature upon them. It appears that they're doing something, it's penance and all that, but it's still within the modes of material nature. On Friday they don't eat meat, they eat fish. But that's still within the mode, because the rules that they follow, tam tam niyamam ashtaya, prakrita niyata svaha. They follow rules and regulations which are influenced by the modes of material nature. So then it's not equal. It's not equal compared to those who are under the influence of the mode of goodness. And then what you say, well, you know, whatever mode you like, it's fine. No, it's not fine. Krishna explains, udvam gachanti sattvasto. Influenced by mode of goodness, udvam gachanti, you'll be elevated. You'll be elevated. Even if you're not chanting Hare Krishna. If you're udvam gachanti sattvasto, if you're influenced by mode of goodness, samadama, tapa, socham, cleanliness, rising early, sense control, mind control, jnanam, vijnanam, knowledge, wisdom, simplicity, mode of goodness, if you're acting according to, you'll be elevated. What to speak is if you chant Hare Krishna and you're in the mode of goodness. Madhya tishtanti rajasaha, if you're influenced by mode of passion, you won't be elevated, you'll remain madhya tishtanti rajasaha. And jagannaguna britishto adho gachanti tamasaha. If you're tamasaha, influenced by mode of ignorance, adho gachanti, you'll be degraded. You'll go down, even if you're doing various rules and regulations, and have faith in them, and have faith in them. That's why it's so vital for us to preach Bhagavad Gita, to preach Bhagavad Gita. Even we have to distribute Bhagavad Gita as a scientific work, a work of science, of human sciences. So the science of life, Bhagavad Gita, the science of life. We have to preach it like, present it in that way. We were with Nam Nishta Prabhu in Mangalore. We visited the chancellor of the university. Won't say which university, but we were visited there, where we had the whole Mayapur Institute Bhakti Vaibhav curriculum pages all printed out. And we're talking to them about establishing studying of Srimad Bhagavatam as a course in the university. As a course and the chancellor, and he was there with other head of departments. They were from the science department. And they were saying, which department? Science, language, and humanities, history, culture, which department? And then from science, they said, how can we fit in science department? And we explained, Chakvadeham punajanmanaiti mameti. What more scientific do you want? You finish this material body. Punajanmanaiti mameti. Punajanmanaiti mameti. You don't take birth again. Well, what's the need of science? Any hospitals, clinics, polyclinics in the spiritual world? No need science. You give up, you don't take birth again. That's the greatest science. anyway, they, yeah, so we're still working on that, and other places we're still working on. Prabhupada wanted that our books are studied in the universities and that you get degrees like a PhD as a result of studying the Bhagavatam. We have to push for that. We have to work on it. Or the Goswami Grantha. Bhakti Rasamrita, PhD on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Why not? Prabhupada said Jiva Goswami was born in Ramkelli. Jiva Goswami born in Ramkelli. And he said the greatest philosopher ever amongst all the Muni, Rishi, gone, Bharat Bhumi, all the Rishis, Munis, philosophers, the greatest philosopher ever, Jiva Goswami Prabhupada. So established Bhagavad Gita. So back to this prakritam niyatam, the modes of material nature will produce their modes of material. They're worshipping according and following and have faith in rules and regulations which are influenced by the modes of material nature. So actually Krishna answers Arjuna, when Arjuna asks, what does it matter? Faith in anything? And Krishna says, no, it does matter. You will go according to the influence, how you're influenced by the modes of material nature. Ek din, Bipranam, Gopal Chapal, Prashandi Pradhan Shai Durnamukha Bachal. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is explaining that one day, because the Shmartas and the scholars, they were envious of the Sankirtan being performed in Advaita Bhavan and Shrivashangan. They were envious of that. So there's one Brahmin, Ek Din Bipranam Gopal Chapal, a Brahmin named Gopal Chapal, Prashandi Pradhan, the chief of the atheists. Prashandi Pradhan, the chief of the atheists. Prabhupada translates that as the chief of the non-believers. And he was a Brahmin, chief of the non-believers. Bhavani Puja Shab Shamrigli Laya Ratre Shribasher Gore Shtan Lepiya. Bhavani Pujan Shamigri Laya, all of the ingredients for Bhavani Pujan. We're explaining how the modes of material nature influence these various rules and regulations. Prabhupada lists what are the Bhavani Pujan Shab Shamigri, what are the items used for the worship of Ma Durga, Bhavani Pujan. Prabhupada lists them as a red flower, a red plantain leaf. You see those red flowers? They're very beautiful. Red flower, only offered to Ma Durga. And those flowers, during the day, they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It's very beautiful. Red the plantain leaf, a pot of wine for Ma Durga, pot of Bhavani, and the reddish sandalwood paste in the morning. So, yeah, sometimes you see we were out on the Prikrama with Mayapur tourism, we were crossing Ma Ganga, and there was one place there on the bank of the Ganga, and there was like the banyan trees all growing. It was a mystical place. These places you see, the banyan trees are mystical. All sorts of ethereal beings hang around there and take shelter in those places, and the snakes in those trees, and of course Lord Shiva also. Many places you see Lord Shiva and Ma Bhavani worshipped under the banyan tree. So we were there on the banks of the river. We were waiting to cross. I was wandering around. This big banyan tree, and there's groves on the bank of Ganga, and all open area. And then there was this thing, I don't know what it's called, but it's this thing, it's like where they put the goat, and they put the goat's head in there. I don't know what that thing's called, but... and that was there under the banyan tree, and I could just imagine... what goes on at that place in the middle of the night on occasion, on the full moon nights or whenever they do those pujas. Just imagine those guys, you've seen them. And you've seen them in Durga Puja and everything. They're all intoxicated, drinking, and they go and they slaughter, and what they're chanting with the big drums, and that's their religion. That's their dharma. That's their dharma. So just to understand, now things have changed. Just imagine the aristocratic society, the level of the social standards at the time when Gauranga Sri Hari appeared here in Navadip Dham. Navadipa Shampati Kei Bone Bare Pare. Who can describe the richness, the Shampati, the assets of Navadip? Navadip Shampati Kei Bone Bare Pare. Ek Ganga Ghate Loka Lok Shnan Kore. Vrindavan Das Thakur says 100,000 people bathing in each ghat. And there were so many ghats, 100,000. Chaturdik hoite log nabadipe jai, nabadipe porile she bidarash pai. From all directions they were coming to Navadip Dham because Navadipe porile. If you study in Navadip Dham, she bidarash pai, you get a taste for learning. Just imagine and Navadip Chandra, Dvijamani, he appeared as the crest jewel of the Brahmins of Navadip and defeated them and shone with such brilliance and illumination amongst the aristocratic society of the Navadip Brahmins, Navadip Chandra, Dvijamani, the jewel of the twice-born in Dvijamani, Gaudhari. Just imagine that, the atheists, they would compose poetry insulting and ridiculing the Vaishnavas. Now they throw things at you and insult you. And in Navadip, they compose poetry, the atheists. They were so learned. They were so aristocratic. They composed poetry, Sanskrit poetry, criticizing and ridiculing the Vaishnavas. And in this case, Sribas Thakur, because he's Gopal Chapal, because he was envious of the respect that Sribas Thakur was being offered. Sribas Thakur was highly respected. The Sankirtan was performed in the house of Sribas Thakur even before the appearance of Gaudhari. The Sankirtan was being performed. These four brothers, Sri Ram, Srinidhi, Sriman, and Sribas, four brothers with their families. At that place, Mahaprabhu revealed his form as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the first official way to the Navadip Basis. Kaha puja koro, kaha dhyan. Who are you worshipping? Who are you meditating upon? Jaha puja kocho deko biddaman. Look, the person you're worshipping and meditating upon is here, present here. Deki biroshane, boshiyachin bishramba, chaturabhuj shanka chakra gadapad madhar. He came out of the temple, he saw Mahaprabhu sitting there, chaturabhuj, displaying four arms. Shankha chakra padma gadar, displaying the four symptoms of Lord Vishnu. And he said, worship me. Glorify me. And first time he was officially presenting himself as Chaitanya Avatar, Kali Juge, Juga Dharma, Name Prochar, Toti Lage Pitavana Chaitanya Avatar, who appeared to Toti Lage for the purpose of Name Prochar, the first time he reveals himself in the house of Srivas Thakur, Srivas Angan. How respected was Srivas Thakur in the society of the devotees. Even before Mahaprabhu's appearance, those brothers were performing Sankirtan with Advaita Thakur and Haridas Thakur, who were all rejoicing at the time of the lunar eclipse when Gaudhari appeared here in Navadip. They were all rejoicing. They were already performing Sankirtan. So he was so respected, and that Brahmin, in order to minimize Srivas Thakur, he's putting the items of worshipping Ma Durga in front of his door in order to give him disrespect. And now, if you're going to the temple worshipping, you're so highly respected. But that was how he disrespected him. Oh, he's a Bhavani Puja. He's worshipping Ma Bhavani. And that's like, oh, what an insult. He'll be criticized, he'll be minimized. And this is how high the standard was. So in the morning, when Srivas Thakur, just try to understand the character of Srivas Thakur. What would we do? Of course, in our case, they probably wouldn't worry about the chandan paste and the red flowers. They'd probably just put the six-pack. Only a few people laughed at that one, the six-pack. That's the beer, or whatever they'd put at the door. That'd be enough. So just try to understand the exalted character of Srivas Thakur. In the morning, he comes and he sees. Opens the door. He sees all of these things here, the plantain flowers, the red flowers, the plantain leaves, the wine, the pot of wine, homemade. They know how to make in the villages. Sometimes you hear in the news, 20, 30 people leave their bodies who are drinking homemade wine. So homemade. Homemade wine there. So what does Srivas Thakur do? He can't just imagine what we would do. Immediately we get rid of it, hide it. What if someone sees us? What if someone sees this? Oh boy, I'm working so hard to get this reputation. So build up this reputation, it'll all be lost. What a disaster. How does Srivas Thakur respond? Nitya Ratri Kore Ami Bhavani Pujan. Amar Mahima Deko Brahmana Sojan. He calls immediately, he calls all the Brahmana Sojan, the society of the respectable Brahmanas. He calls them and he announces, all the stuff is still there, the paraphernalia. He makes an announcement. Nitya Ratre Kori Ami Bhavani Pujan. Look, Nitya Ratre Kori Ami Bhavani Pujan. Every night I'm worshipping Ma Durga. Every night. Amar Mahima Deko Brahmana Sojan. Look at my glories. Amar Mahima Deko Brahmana Sojan. Look at my glories, O assembly of Brahmins. That's amazing. Amazing that he accepted that as actually that he didn't like the respect and the honor that was being showed to him, considering himself so unqualified. He didn't like that. He wasn't comfortable like with that, and he immediately embraced the opportunity. Oh, now they'll stop respecting me. He calls them. He calls the Brahmanas. And immediately the Brahmanas were so embarrassed. I mean, they knew. Immediately they called a sweeper to clean that place and everything. Now, what happened to that Gopal Chapal? Just see how dear is Srivas Thakur to Gauranga Sri Hari. What happened to that Brahmin, Gopal Chapal? After 3 days, he was inflicted with leprosy. Covered incessantly, his body covered with germs and insects biting him. He felt unbearable pain in his body constantly. And because leprosy is an infectious disease, Gopal Chapal was cast out of the community, and he had to live here and there in the remote jungle places and in the Ganga banks here and there where there's no people going. You'd have to live in these places because anyway, people would see him, they'd shoo him, they'd get sticks and get out of here. So it so happened that one day he was on the banks of the Ganga. And Gaudhari was there to take his bath. Gopal Chapal, because they're older. Srivas Thakur, he's older. Nityananda Prabhu is older. He's in his 30s. Mahaprabhu in early 20s. Srivas Thakur is older, mid-30s, 40s. And Advaita Thakur is in his 60s and 70s. That's why he has the beard. He's like the grandfather, Advaita Thakur. So that Gopal Chapal, he says that, my dear nephew, I'm your uncle in our village relationship. I'm your maternal uncle in our village relationship. Just see how this leprosy has greatly afflicted me. Lok shab udharite tomar avatar. Lok shab udharite. To deliver all the people. Lok shab udharite. To deliver all the people. Tomar avatar. You have appeared. Muni baro dukhi. More koraho udhar. Muri baro dukhi. I'm big time suffering. Muri baro dukhi. More koraho udhar. You please deliver me. You've appeared, it's the avatar, Toma avatar, log shab udharita. You appeared to deliver all the people. I'm suffering so greatly. Please deliver me. The patitaṁ, the doyamoy, doya shagor, doya shamudra, the ocean of mercy, who's come to deliver the most full. And how did he respond? Greatly angry. Oh, Mahaprabhu, greatly angry. Oh, sinful person. Envious of pure devotees, I shall not deliver you. Rather, I shall have you bitten by these germs for millions of years. Shribashe kuryāt bhavani pujan koti janma hobe tor rodava patan. Shribashe kuryāt bhavani pujan. You made it appear that Srivas Thakur was worshipping Ma Bhavani. Koti janma hobe to rodava poton. Koti janma, 10 million births. Koti janma hobe to rodava poton. You'll be fallen down in hell for 10 million births. After saying this, Gauranga, Sri Hari, went, took his bath and left. And that's almost the end of the story. Almost. But just see, why? It's so heavy. 10 million births, you'll be in hell. Why? Because Sri Bashir, Kuryāt, Bhavani Pujan, you tried to insult, you disrespected and you ill repute, you tried to publicly humiliate and minimize the character of Srivas Thakur. So that was Mahaprabhu, they became so angry. Just see how dear is Srivas Thakur to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And remember this when we go to Sri Bhajangan and fall down and pay obeisances at his home. Just remember how. Even though he's delivering everybody, and as he's walking, as he's going on the path in South India, Prabhupada Kaviraj Goswami says, more merciful in South India, tour, because patra bicha nahe, nahishtan ashtan. Any place, any person, jai jaha pai, taha kore prem dan. He gave love of Godhead freely to everyone, without any patra bicha nahe, without considering their qualification in South India. But if you're in this category, that you intentionally try to insult and minimize and publicly disgrace such a Mahaprabhu says pure devotee, then that's it. You know, there's no hope. No hope. That's 10 million births. And Mahaprabhu left to take bath. No consideration. So anyway, it's not all that shocking. But it was several years later. Several years. Shanna Shiradhanama Nahe, Shannash Kuryāt, Nija Janmashtana Rahe Kotumbalaya. Mahaprabhu's from his own mouth, he says in Shantipur. It's not the duty of a sannyasi, having accepted sannyas, to remain at home with the family members. So make some arrangement whereby I will not be criticized for remaining in Mayapur, but I can keep your association. For that reason, Mahaprabhu, Sachimata suggested Jagannath Puri. Tomra Shab, Korite Paro, Gamon, you can all go and come. Ganga Shnane Hobe, Kobe Tod Agamon, and he may also come one time and take bath in the Ganga. She said, Ganga Shnane, Kobe Hobe Dar Agamon. He may come again to take bath in the Ganga if he's close by in Jagannath Puri. And he did, after 4 years. Firstly arriving in Jagannath Puri, delivered Shavabhama Bhattacharya. Magh Mash, January, took sannyas. Falgun Mash, February, March, journeyed to Jagannath Puri. Chaitra Mash, April, delivered Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Boishak month, April, end of April, he left for South Indian tour. And 2 years, South Indian tour, came back. Again, he was interested to go to Vrindavan, and not given permission, Ramananda Roy, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And then remained in Jagannath Puri another 2 years, and then eventually they gave him permission to go to Vrindavan, and Mahaprabhu explained at that time, Gauda deshe hoy moy dui shamasrai janani janabhi e dui doya moy. In Gauda Desh I have two shelters, Janani, Sachimata, Janabhi, Magongo. So I will go to Bengal, I will go to Vrindavan via Bengal and take all of the Gauda Bhaktagon, the devotees from Bengal, not just Navadip, all the different places, Kulinagram, Adishaptagram, Katwa, Panihati, Shantipur, all Gauda Bhaktagon. I will travel through Bengal and collect all Gauda Bhaktagon and take them with me to Vrindavan. And it was only at Ramkeli that Sanatana Goswami explained that this is not the way to, suggested this is not the way to go to Vrindavan with such a crowd. So Mahaprabhu, he, at Kanai Natashala, and just near Ramkeli, you can go and visit Kanai Natashala, a very special place, where we have ISKCON, has the main ISKCON, big, like hill in the middle of on the bank of the Ganga, remote place, ISKCON temple there. That's Kanai Natashala. And there Mahaprabhu decided, considering the words of Sanatana Goswami Prabhupada, he turned back and didn't carry on to Vrindavan, and again came through Bengal. So for that reason, Sachimata, after Mahaprabhu took sannyas, Sachimata was able to see Gauranga, Sri Hari, 3 times. And when she first saw him after taking sannyas, she said, do not do like Vishwarup. We never heard anything of him again. So Mahaprabhu stayed in Jagannath Puri and then again visited Bengal But he didn't come to Mayapur. He was in Vidyanagar, the other bank, the other side of the Ganga. Vidyanagar, Koladeep. He came with tens of thousands of followers at Vidyanagar. And then the full details of that story, perhaps we can share another time. But it's very glorious how all of the people of Navadip, they crossed the Ganga. Hearing that the Nyash Chodamani, the jewel of the sannyasis, has come to Vidyanagar, and all regretting that we were in the village. He was our village friend, but we didn't understand who he was. And now, having Mahaprabhu's South Indian tour, taking sannyas and preaching, they understood, and they all crossed the Ganga to see him at the house of Madhusudan Bachaspati in Vidyanagar, the younger brother of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, where they had their school there. At that place, Mahaprabhu, he said, I want to stay here a few days to bathe in Ma Ganga. And all the Navadip Basis, they all crossed the Ganga and took his association. And at that time, Devananda Pandit, who was also an offender, Mahaprabhu came in when he was speaking on the Bhagavatam. Mahaprabhu came in and took the Bhagavatam and tore it up because of his non-devotional Bhagavatam presentation. But he got the mercy of Bhakrisha Pandit and Mahaprabhu subsequently. So this was 4 years later. 2 years South India? No. When this happened, we're not sure. Maybe this was in the beginning of Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan pastimes in Navadip for 4 years. So maybe it was 3 or 4 years that he was wandering, Gopal Chapal, in the rejected places, 3 or 4 years, and then another 4 years, Mahaprabhu's South Indian tour, 2 years in Jagannath Puri, and then he returned to Bengal on the western bank of Ganga. So perhaps 7 or 8 years, Gopal Chapal was wandering around, bitten by the worms and leprosy. But he also came to Vidyanagar. At that time, Mahaprabhu delivered him. At that time, Mahaprabhu delivered him after 8 years. Some thoughts on today's verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, if there are any questions.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Very beautiful lecture in class. Prabhuji, I had 2 questions. One first is, before Mahaprabhu, as you mentioned that there were devotees doing
Mahamantra. Advaita Thakur was here. Narad Muni was here. Lord Brahma was here. I'm chanting Hare Krishna. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah, he was a great devotee, Madhusudan Bachaspati, Mahaprabhu Priya. Mahaprabhu showed his mercy upon him. He was a great learned scholar, brother of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Yeah. Yes, Prabhu. Of hearing and chanting. Well, it's difficult if you're an offender of the Vaishnavas. That's the only category of people who are not going to become affected and make progress, if you're an offender of the Vaishnavas. So Mahaprabhu, he instructed Gopal Chapal to go and take the blessings of Srivas Thakur, to go and get forgiveness of Srivas Thakur. Without being forgiven by that Vaishnav who he offended, he will not be able to make progress in his chanting. Bahu janma kori jori shravan kirtanan tabu na pai Krishna pare prem dhan. If you're an offender, even you're chanting Bahu janma kori jori shravan kirtan, Bahu janma, for many births, if you're chanting Hare Krishna, Shravan kirtan tabu na pai pabe Krishna prem dhan. You will not get love of Godhead if you commit offenses. Grantat Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Shira Prabhupada ki, Gauda Praman.